Hey everyone, my name is Julia. I hope you're all enjoying Space City Camp. I am here to talk to you all about world building to plot today. And before I do, I just want to introduce myself. Again, my name is Julia and I am a current senior at Bradley University. In high school, I competed for St. Croix Lutheran Academy in West St. Paul, Minnesota. So I competed on the Minnesota circuit. I was a finalist in pros at state in 2021, which was my junior year. And then I also qualified for state my senior year in 2022. During my high school career, I competed in DI, pros, duo, HI, and impromptu. And currently I'm president of Bradley University speech team on the collegiate circuit. And I have some of my collegiate accomplishments on there. I'll only highlight one. The thing I'm most proud of is being a finalist at NFA in Poi. Outside of speech, I love walking my 3 dogs and going to concerts. So that's a little bit about me and my qualifications, if you will. So let's dive right into world building. And some of you might be wondering, what is world building? Put simply, world building is crafting a space that your audience can see and feel. It's not just about props or realism and mimicking things. It's about shaping a narrative that pushes your plot forward. You have to create a space that the judge and your audience can see and feel without ever actually saying, I'm in a car, or I'm in a castle, or I'm in a park. Great world building tells us where we are, how the character feels about that space, and what the space wants from them. It's the invisible stuff that makes your piece feel the most real. I think where people get confused a lot of time is that they think that blocking is world building. Blocking is not world building. Any movement without intention is just noise. And we've all seen those pieces where someone's constantly moving, but we don't know where they are. That's not world building. That's wandering. When you make a blocking choice or a gesture choice, it should have spatial logic, emotional logic, and narrative purpose. Spatial logic means where are you in the world? Having a very detailed and consistent idea of what your space looks like. If you don't even know what your space looks like, you can't expect your audience to either. Emotional logic just means, how does this space feel? We all have emotions that are tied to different places, and in the same way, your character is going to have emotions about the space. Emotional logic can only be fulfilled when you have a very clear idea of who your character is. So before you start world building, create the character, build their lore, know them like a best friend, like they're part of you. Then you can decide what is their relationship to this place. And then finally, narrative purpose. What is this movement telling us about what is happening? Don't move just to move. Move to tell us what is happening in this space. Advanced performers use space to signal story arcs. They understand that space doesn't just exist, it evolves. So plot isn't about rising action, it's about shifting that space and power. When you understand world building, you understand how to create a world that only your story could take place in. It's understanding why your story can't take place anywhere else. Great world building helps the audience feel when stakes rise or the control shifts, when something emotionally irreversible just happens. Great world building doesn't just set the scene, it moves the story forward. It gives us context, pressure, and meaning to what we're doing. So let's take an example. A story may begin and end in a bedroom, but that same setting can hold multiple different meanings for the character. What was once nostalgic and safe and familiar is now cold and empty and claustrophobic. The character hasn't left the scene. The space hasn't changed physically, but the character's emotions have. Therefore, they're going to interact with it differently. I've said this a few times, but environments don't just support the story, they push it forward. So this means plot happens because of place. Where do you start to build your world that pushes your plot forward? The first question you need to ask yourself is, what is this space making the character do? And how is that influencing the decisions that they're making? You can use your environment to do all kinds of things to your character. Your environment could trap your character, pressure them, isolate, transform, protect, among other things. Think about these words as you're thinking about your character and where they need to be by the end of this story. And from there, we can start to build our environment. If your story could happen anywhere, you haven't built the right environment yet. But Julia, how do I build a plot active environment from there? To make your space serve your plot, you then have to ask yourself even more questions. What physically is in this space? And this can be as detailed as you want. You want it to be consistent though. Knowing where a chair is, knowing where a couch is, knowing where the photos are on the wall and how high up are they. The next thing you need to know is what makes it emotionally charged. We as humans all have emotions tied to certain places, and your character is going to as well. And the more you know them, the more you're gonna know how they feel about this space and how are they going to react to it. So the way that you hold yourself in different spaces is very different. Something I tell people all the time when I'm helping them with pieces is that you might not hold yourself the same in class or at speech practice or in church or outside at the park or at a concert. Somewhere you feel maybe more insecure, your frame is going to be smaller. But maybe somewhere you're more confident in, like a speech round, you're going to be holding your shoulders back and your chin up, contrasted to slouching or being downcast and not making eye contact. All of these little things can help tell you about the emotional relationship to the place. Finally, how does this setting impact what happens next? Especially in DI, your space has a lot to do with the plot. And if it were to happen anywhere else, the pacing would be much different, the emotions would be much different. So understanding how the space affects what happens next is really crucial to building that plot active environment. So for example, if your character's in their childhood bedroom and they see a shelf of all these old trophies, that memory rush can spark resentment. And then suddenly they may be forced to confront their failures. You can see how the argument is pushed forward because of the setting. The space caused a plot beat. This is kind of where we level up. We talked about knowing your character, but all your pieces should have an additional character, your environment. You should know your environment just as well as you know your character. Think of your environment as a second character. So build lore for your environment, add adjectives and colors and songs that kind of help you know that environment very intimately. For example, when we're thinking about a church, we're not thinking about just a building. You could add the adjective judgmental. Or if we're talking about a kitchen, maybe it's cozy. But if we add that suffocating word to there, it gives us a very different feel. This is especially important in poi, prose, and DI. Those are the big interp categories where you're building up to an emotional climax. The environment can help your audience feel one emotion and kind of feel it shift over time, and it can help you get that big build that we're often trying to get to. When we're talking about world building to plot, we want to add to the plot without actually having to add any words. So a lot of this is going to come from your physical movements and things you do with your body. So the way that you breathe, my speech coach always tells me that a big way to trigger emotions and make people feel the emotions that you want them to feel has to do with breath. So breathing the way you would when you're sad or when you're angry has a huge effect on the environment. The way you breathe outside on a humid day is different than when you're just laying in your bed. Pay attention to those things. Tone is really, really important, and volume. That your gaze, your eyes are so important. Build the world with your eyes, the way that you look up and down at things, the way that you pretend to talk to people, the way that your eyes are. It's a very subtle thing. Your audience may not realize you're doing it, but you are slowly building the world with your eyes for them. Silence and pacing is one of my favorite things to build an emotional landscape. Sometimes you don't need to use any words. The silence in combination with your breath and your blocking and your gaze is enough for your audience to feel it. You don't need to say that the room is heavy. We should feel it with you. So putting this into practice, let's say that a plot of a piece is that a mother is telling her child that she's leaving. This is going to be a very different story depending on the world that we build. And it depends what emotions we want to go for. So say we have this piece take place in a kitchen. It's domestic. It makes it feel like this has been building. It adds that extra tension, especially in a place that maybe should be safe and maybe represents nourishment, and now we feel like there's something missing. In a car, that's gonna be way different than the kitchen. They're stuck together, it's claustrophobic, and it can make the character feel like there's no way out. On a playground, the space contrasts with innocence and betrayal, and that betrayal of the mother is gonna cut so much deeper, especially because we're in a public place. It can almost make them feel more stunned and caught off guard. Your blocking and your tone shouldn't just fill the space. It should mirror the tone and the plot shift. All three of these places are going to do that differently. So now that we've talked about all this stuff, I've linked 2 videos. So there's this link here, and then there's this YouTube video here. And you can find my slides in the Google Classroom, so you can go and watch these. If you have a favorite performance that you want to watch instead, that's fine. But these are 2 of my favorite performances from the collegiate circuit, 2 performers that I really look up to. And after you've watched a video, or while you're watching the video, answer these questions that we've just talked about here. What is the environment? Can you clearly tell where the performer is? Not because they've said it, but because you can feel it. How is the plot shaped by this space? What is happening because of the environment? Is the space adding to the tension, limiting options, or raising emotional stakes? What specific actions or blocking choices helped build the environment? Are they interacting with invisible objects, using breath, pacing, gaze, or silence to shape the space? And how does the space evolve? Does the environment change over time, or does it stay the same? While the character's relationship does change. So answer these questions. Probably wondering, how does the environment drive plot differently in different pieces? And it's true, every category is going to be a little bit different for environment. DI, the environment holds a lot of emotion. It specifically amplifies the tension. You want the audience to feel trapped in the space with your character. It's the most immersive category, in my opinion. With prose, the author's space kind of guides the tone. Use facial expressions and breath to shape memory and reflection rather than more physical spaces. So prose, you're not going to be moving around usually as much as you are in DI. So most of the environment work is shown through your body, but there's still a lot you can do with that. In Poi, each text has its own space, so you can have actually a lot of fun with Poi in creating environments for all of your different pieces. And your environment can actually help signal genre transitions. So you can attach different emotions to these different pieces. It kind of helps grab your audience's hand and take them with you into all these different spaces. I like to compare it to like, you're kind of going through these different portals and going into these different spaces all together. In Duo, you're sharing a space and sharing a plot. The room is your third character, but every person relates to the shared space differently. So you can have a lot of fun with this. You and your duo partner should not have the same relationship to the space. You should both have unique relationships to the space. However, you should be on the same page about where everything is physically, and you can kind of build that lore together. In HI, the setting really helps set up or hit the punchline. I've seen a lot of HIs where maybe the environment isn't as clear, and sometimes we can miss jokes or things just don't seem as funny when the environment is just kind of vague. So use your setting to help set up the comedic timing and reveal irony. Big, over exaggerated movements. This can be a lot of fun to brainstorm because you don't really have to listen to the rules of logic and physics in HI. So your environment can be really as crazy as you want. I mean, that can go for Duo and DI too, but it's especially common in HI where you're doing all kinds of wacky stuff. All right, so now how do we apply this to our own pieces? So what I'd encourage you to do is to just start with 1 to 2 clear objects and anchor them somewhere in the space and be consistent with them, whether that's a door or a chair. Be consistent with where they are in the space and just start with those. Adding too many things all at once can make things confusing for you and for your audience. Perfect those, and then you can go from there. We talked about this earlier, but use silence and your eyes to build the space. You don't always have to be talking about describing something. Take a moment in your piece just to let your character take it all in and to look at things with their eyes and examine things really closely. And that's going to help bring us in as an audience. Ask yourself, what would not happen if the space were different? What would happen differently? This can be really helpful if you're really stuck on how your environment impacts your plot. But if you think about the plot points you need to hit, what would in the space or that's not in the space affect those plot points? This one's really fun. I really encourage you guys to rewrite your scene with 2 different spaces. This is something I used to do a lot in high school, and I actually used to call it like fun runs, where I would maybe choose a completely different character and a completely different setting, but I'd run the same script and just see how it feels different. And sometimes it can be really funny, and it also helps you just loosen up as a performer, especially when we've been performing things for a really long time. It can help you think of new ideas you may not have thought of before because you've been so stuck in your old ways. And it can also just give you a better idea of the motions you're trying to hit and the little things that you're doing that actually do have a really big impact on the scene. When you're world building, it is really helpful to draw things out. So for all of my pieces this past year, I would draw my scenes on the whiteboard. So I'd mark where the rug was and the cabinets and the couch and the drawers, every single thing. Even if I didn't necessarily interact with it during the piece, it was written down. And you can get fun with this too. Like if you want to build it in Sims, great, maybe that's helpful for you. Another thing I've done too is put painter's tape on the ground and just mark it out on the floor. That way it's very, very consistent. I am not taking more steps than I need to, and it's the same performance every single time. Another thing to try is to perform your piece silently. Are the plot beats still clear? Could your audience still understand what's happening? So take your script completely out of the picture. Is your environment detailed enough that we could still understand where the plot's going and where we are? And that's going to be a good indicator of if we've properly built the world. That is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or Google chat me. I would love to help. And I hope that you guys could take at least something out of this. Have fun with the rest of Space City Camp. And I hope you guys all have an amazing season next year. Bye.